Good afternoon, everyone. I'm speaking as a peace activist today and representative of Support Assange and the Wikileaks coalition in Sydney. As a grassroots supporter, I hope my presence here will help to encourage others who feel powerless in these troubled times to realise their potential and the necessity to raise their voice. I'm no different to you. I have no public profile. I'm a grandmother wanting to leave a better world for her grandchildren to grow in. You can foment change. Grassroots action has always enabled that. Our fight is a numbers game, so every one of you, every last one of you, is needed here. You are important in the struggle for truth and transparency. Don't underestimate your power in our diminishing democracy. We may only have a small window of opportunity left for us to voice our opinions in freedom. When we hear our government officials spruiking the company line on Julian Assange, we need to realise they are not speaking to the informed. They are speaking to the misinformed and the uninformed. Their rhetoric we can help to counter. Their mischief making is something we need to put a stop to. There's many facts available in the public domain for us to use to counter their lies. Thanks to freedom of information requests, we know there is a document that outlines the pat replies used by our representatives when constituents ask tricky questions about Julian Assange. So it's nice to know our representatives aren't trusted to think for themselves. So be brave, because they're not. Start conversations with friends, with relatives, workmates. The truth is far too important to let it be denied us. You can also donate via wikileaks.org. You can go to the Bendigo Bank or snail mail and post a cheque. All the information's there at the website. And you can help Wikileaks keep up their vital work. There's a new campaign, Vote One for Wikileaks, vote with your wallet. And this is running in lieu with the US election. So I'd like to give you a quote by Julian Assange, as I feel this nutshells the reason for what I see as chain wars. New wars are started before we've even put the last one out. So his quote, "Looking at the enormous quantity and diversity of these military or intelligence apparatus insider documents, what I see is a sprawling estate in what we would traditionally call the military-industrial complex or the military intelligence complex. And this sprawling industrial estate is growing, becoming more and more selective, becoming more and more uncontrolled. This is not a sophisticated conspiracy controlled at the top. This is a vast movement of self-interest with thousands and thousands of players all working together and against each other to produce an end result, which is Iraq and Afghanistan and Colombia, and to keep that going. Our taxes feed a war machine. This is what peace activists are up against." Harking back to the title of this forum, it's interesting that Julian Assange has been called a high-tech terrorist by Vice President Joe Biden. For, as folk singer Holly Tannen said, conspiracy to commit journalism. And for informing us of how our tax dollars pay for aggressive wars we have been and are currently involved in. According to Fred Burton of Stratfor, Assange is going to make a nice bride in prison. Screw the terrorist. He'll be eating cat food forever. And taking bizarre to a new level, the 9/11 colouring book with terrorist trading cards featuring Julian Assange. I kid you not. Now, Julian Assange and Wikileaks staff and supporters have been labelled enemies of the state. That's you and I, folks. That's something we need to speak to our government about. Keeping this in mind, the mainstream media and governments have a massive platform to disseminate their hubris. It is beholden on us to correct their tripe, and today's forum is part of that. Whenever we engage our politicians or members of the public, we need to affirm Julian Assange is a journalist or an editor-in-chief, and Wikileaks is a publishing, press or media outlet. State it. We have access to a cache of documents that activists can use to fact-check government myth-making and counter them with expansive source documents available to us through wikileaks.org. These documents enable us to be our own journalists with access to information once deemed for their eyes only. WikiLeaks disclosures are source documents. I guarantee WikiLeaks will be studied in higher educational facilities long into the future, long after this current regime is gone, both in the United States and at home. The Afghan and Iraq releases should be mandatory reading for those that blindly support the call to war with jingoistic nationalism. We need to understand the reality. We need to know special forces assassination squads are kicking in doors of Afghan families in the dead of night, murdering women and children. We need to know the civilian death toll drones are inflicting on the long-suffering people of Waziristan. We need to know of the systematic torture that occurs seemingly with no checks, balances or international oversights in black ops sites across the planet. Without this information freely available to us, how is it possible to understand what is in our national interest and done in our name? How can we possibly make informed decisions without the knowledge as to whether our allies comply with international law regarding war crimes, invasions, occupations, genocide? We have been told by Nicola Roxon and Julia Gillard that the release of war documents is dangerous. I say to them, more dangerous than war itself. This, among other statements by senior government members, are ridiculous. The winds of war change rapidly, and most documents are historical by the time of release. They are also carefully redacted. No harm has been caused to innocent people. The harm that is caused by WikiLeaks is to the alleged integrity of governments and the valour of war. The West does not have a monopoly on democracy and human rights. The fact we are here today is testimony to that, and it is naive to believe otherwise, given the wealth of evidence to the contrary. John Pilger said, "It is said that the first casualty of war is the truth." No, it's not. It's journalism. Thankfully, the world now has a People's Free Press publishing organisation to help level the playing field of knowledge, and the US is not amused, and they're not going to play nice. So raise your voice in defence of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange for all kinds of reasons: the environment, Indigenous rights, the corporate media, the list goes on, but I'm speaking here today as a peace activist. War is terror by state on a massive scale. The US used depleted uranium and cluster munitions, foul weapons that continue killing innocent people long after the conflict is over. The Australian government's subservience to the US runs deeper than a Prime Minister all dewy-eyed over them. While claiming the moral high ground on cluster munitions, our government did the United States bidding behind the scenes to convince other countries not to sign. This unconscionable act was outed by WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks documents inform in bare facts the truth of modern war, giving lie to the pretense that we fight for humanitarian reasons. The fate of civilians in a war-torn country is much grimmer than that of a combatant. In days of yore, 90% of deaths in war were combatants. Now 90% of deaths are non-combatants, 1/3 of which are children. War these days is sold like any commodity, in sound bites, catchy platitudes, and we have been told so many times we've turned a corner in Afghanistan. It's obvious we're going nowhere, just trying to add to the US's prestige. Our government never tell us what we have learned from Wikileaks. They are aware we would not tolerate the reality of the situation, and like Lady Macbeth, we have blood on our hands. Being privy to Wikileaks documents on post-9/11 wars, for the first time in history, we are in a position to make informed decisions regarding our willingness to engage in aggressive imperialist wars, essentially killing civilians. Australia has wantonly participated in brutal, unnecessary conflicts, not in the name of freedom and democracy, but in US sycophancy. Successive governments can't seem to say to the US, yes, we are allies and we expect to remain so, but this war is not in our national interest and against the wishes of the Australian people. This is how a mature, sovereign nation would couch their refusal to murder poor people in their own country and steal their resources. Similar wording should be used to our ally regarding Julian Assange. It has become overtly apparent that our government's idea of national interest is in conflict with our own. Last week, I spoke with Afghan peace volunteers, and they asked what could they do to help Julian Assange and Wikileaks. I suggested they become a FOWL group, and they agreed. For those that you aren't aware, FOWL's Friends of Wikileaks. If these young people in a war-torn country are willing to raise their voices because they know Wikileaks and Julian Assange are good and true, surely their bravery can be copied here in a land where death does not stalk us on a daily basis. We need to rally, use social media, talk, write, visit our representatives, the media and anyone else who is willing to listen in order to correct the untruths. The government has to be shown we are not going away and our numbers are growing. Tell our government we demand to live in a free democracy. As part of that democracy, free speech and freedom of the press is an axiom. Isn't this the reason we were told Iraq and Afghanistan were invaded? As is said, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Well, Julian Assange may be considered trash to the US, but he is our national treasure. Demand our government does its job and protects our fellow citizen, Editor-in-Chief of Wikileaks, award-winning journalist Julian Assange, from a brutal totalitarian regime and rogue state, the USA. Thank you.